How many times have you snapped over something small this week? Once? Twice? More than you'd like to admit? Or maybe it's not anger, it's your love life. Every new partner starts fresh, but ends the same. The same red flags, the same heartbreak. You tell yourself it's just bad luck. But what if it's not? What if there's a pattern underneath it all? One rooted in a part of you you've never fully seen. A hidden part, quietly shaping your world. Not toward peace, but toward pain. If this feels disturbingly familiar, you're definitely not alone. So many of us move through life feeling like a mystery, even to ourselves, as if invisible strings are quietly pulling the show. And those strings, they often lead back to what the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung called the shadow self. Now, despite the name, the shadow isn't evil. It's simply made up of the parts of us we've pushed away, denied, or never fully recognized. Our fears, our insecurities, the impulses we were told to suppress, and even our hidden gifts, our buried desires, our forgotten strengths. We start tucking them away early, often in childhood, because someone somewhere made us believe those parts weren't okay. But here's the truth. Ignoring your shadow doesn't make it disappear. It just makes it stronger. Quietly, subtly, it begins shaping your thoughts, your choices, your emotional patterns, and especially your relationships, often steering you straight toward the very things you're trying to run from. Today, we are looking at 7 clear signs that your life may be calling out for shadow work. Shadow work is the brave journey inward, a process of exploring what's been hidden and bringing the unconscious into the light. It's not about judgment, it's about understanding, about reclaiming the pieces of yourself that were never truly broken, just forgotten. This kind of work brings clarity, emotional healing, and a life that feels more real, more peaceful, and more you. So if you're tired of being steered by unconscious patterns and you're truly ready for inner peace, recognizing these signs might just be your first powerful step. The first, and maybe the most obvious, sign that your shadow wants your attention is when you find yourself having those super intense emotional reactions, the kind we often call big triggers. Think about it. Your partner makes a casual comment about your spending, and you erupt with a level of rage that feels way bigger than the situation. Or a coworker hums a bit too loud, and suddenly you're filled with this sharp, almost violent irritation. Maybe a friend asks an innocent question. How was your weekend? And hours later, you're still spiraling in anxiety or shame. These aren't just bad moods. They're emotional explosions, outsized, out of nowhere, and they leave you and everyone around you feeling confused and shaken. So where do they come from? Often these intense reactions are your shadow, projecting itself outward. In Jungian psychology, a charged emotional response usually means something in the outside world has poked at something unacknowledged within you. The thing that triggers you in someone else is often a mirror, reflecting a hidden wound, a buried fear, or a part of yourself you've refused to face. That anger at your partner's comment about money, it might not be about the money at all. Maybe it's touching a deep fear of scarcity you have carried since childhood, or a buried feeling of being controlled that you've never consciously dealt with. That irritation with your coworkers humming? It might be tied to a repressed need for control, or the part of you that feels constantly ignored. When parts of us are pushed into the shadow, they don't just disappear. They don't sit quietly in the dark. They stay active. They hold an emotional charge. And when something in daily life hits that charge, the shadow erupts. It's like an invisible wound. And when it gets touched, the pain feels way bigger than it should. That intensity you feel, it's not random. It's a signal, pointing to something deeper that's still waiting to be seen. If you find yourself hijacked by emotional storms, if your reactions are consistently stronger than the situation calls for, it's a strong sign your shadow self is trying to speak. It's saying, hey, there's something down here you haven't looked at. A part of you is hurting. And if you ignore that trigger or just blame it on someone else, the shadow keeps its grip. You might think, my partner is so insensitive, or as my coworker is unbearable. And maybe there's some truth in that, but the intensity of your reaction often points inward. Shadow work invites you to pause in those heated moments and ask yourself, what is this really about for me to say? What part of me is being stirred up that I haven't yet acknowledged? This isn't about blaming yourself. It's about self-discovery. It's about recognizing that these big triggers aren't just inconvenient outbursts. They're signposts, markers, leading you straight to the parts of your shadow that are still longing for healing, for integration, and for your attention. Until those parts are brought into the light, they'll keep showing up in the form of emotional drama over and over again. Do you feel like you're stuck in an endless loop of messy relationship patterns? Maybe you always seem to attract partners who are emotionally distant, overly critical, or just won't commit, even though what you really long for is closeness. Or maybe it's not them, it's you. Maybe you can't seem to set healthy boundaries, and you keep ending up in situations where you feel used, unheard, or disrespected. You leave one relationship saying, never again. But months, or even years later, you find yourself back in a remarkably similar boat with someone new. These repeating patterns are not random. They're a huge sign that your shadow is at work, trying to resolve something old, something unhealed. Our first relationships, especially with our parents or caregivers, create the blueprint for how we understand love, connection, and our own sense of worth. If those early days involve rejection, abandonment, criticism, or simply a lack of emotional safety, those experiences don't just disappear. They go underground. They become part of your shadow, shaping your unconscious beliefs about who you are and what kind of love you think you deserve. For example, if you felt emotionally neglected as a child, you may carry a belief like, I'm not really worthy of consistent love. And without knowing it, you may be drawn to partners who recreate that same unavailability. Not because you want to suffer, but because your psyche is trying to bring an old wound to the surface so it can finally be healed. Jung called this lifelong drive toward healing individuation. And addressing these shadow patterns in your relationships is a key part of that journey. Projection also plays a massive role here. We often project unacknowledged pieces of our own shadow onto our partners. If you've disowned your own need for control, you might see your partner as too controlling, even when they're simply asserting themselves. If you're holding on to repressed anger, you may constantly accuse your partner of being the angry one. On the flip side, we also project the positive parts of our shadow, our confidence, our power, our creativity. We project those qualities onto someone else and then idealize them until they inevitably fall short and we're left disappointed or even heartbroken. But the truth is, those traits were yours too, all along. These patterns repeat because your unconscious mind is trying to fix something. It's like a scratched record, playing the same painful tune over and over, hoping this time the ending will be different. But without awareness of the shadow beneath it, you're likely to keep playing out the same story in a different costume. You might blame your partner, the dating scene, or just bad luck. But the one constant in all your relationships is you. And more specifically, the unacknowledged parts of your shadow. Shadow work here means taking an honest, courageous look at your relationship history. It means asking hard questions. What are the recurring patterns? What kinds of people do I always go for? What roles do I keep playing? What emotions keep surfacing? Fear of abandonment, fear of being smothered, shame, jealousy. The answers to those questions will lead you straight to the shadow beliefs and unhealed wounds running the show beneath the surface. For instance, if you always attract critical partners, you might be projecting an inner critic you haven't made conscious. Or you might carry the hidden belief that you deserve criticism. If you struggle with boundaries, maybe there's a shadow fear that speaking up for your needs will lead to rejection. But here's the good news. When you bring these shadow aspects into the light, you can begin to heal. You can start to choose differently. Instead of repeating the same painful cycles, your relationships can become places of real connection, of mutual growth, of authentic love. The kind of love that doesn't replay the past, but actually supports your wholeness. Are you that person who just can't say no? Do you constantly go out of your way for others, sacrificing your own needs, your energy, and even your happiness? Maybe you bend over backwards to avoid even the slightest hint of conflict. You agree to things you don't actually believe in. You take on tasks that were never yours to carry, all so you can keep everyone else happy and hopefully gain their approval. This is chronic people-pleasing, and it's a major sign that your shadow self is running the show. Often driven by a deep fear of rejection or a core belief that you're just not enough. On the surface, being a people pleaser might look like a good thing. You're kind, helpful, easygoing, but when it becomes chronic, when it feels like you can't not do it, it's usually because you're suppressing your real feelings, your true needs, your authentic self, in exchange for approval. The shadow underneath it all, often rooted in a belief like the real me isn't lovable. Maybe as a child, you learned your needs didn't matter. Maybe speaking up led to rejection, disapproval, or even punishment. So you hid your assertiveness. You buried your personal desires. You pushed away your negative emotions, anger, sadness, frustration, and replaced them with a people-pleasing mask. But here's the cost. This constant self-abandonment doesn't stay quiet forever. It builds up into resentment, into exhaustion, into a creeping sense that you're faking your way through life. You might feel like a chameleon, always adapting, always pleasing, always shifting, but losing touch with who you really are underneath. That tension inside, that's your shadow screaming for attention. It wants your authentic self to be seen, to be heard, to be valued. A close relative of people-pleasing, and another shadow in disguise, is what we call toxic positivity. It's that relentless pressure to stay upbeat and positive, even when you're facing real pain, real struggle, real unfairness. It shows up as, just be positive. Look on the bright side. Good vibes only. And while optimism can be powerful, toxic positivity is a form of emotional suppression, a spiritual bypass, a mask. When you deny your sadness, your anger, your fear, you're not healing, you're hiding. These beliefs often come from early conditioning. Maybe you were taught that crying was weak, that anger was dangerous, that being cheerful kept you safe. So you learned to smile no matter what. But those emotions you shoved away, they didn't disappear. They sank into your shadow where they started to fester, leading to anxiety, depression, even physical issues. Because that emotional energy has nowhere else to go. Shadow work here means facing the parts of yourself you've tried to hide. Your right to say no, your valid anger, your true desires, your moments of sadness, of fear, of imperfection. It's the courageous act of saying, I don't need to perform to be worthy. I don't need to be liked to be enough. It's learning to set boundaries and stand by them, to express your full range of emotions, even the uncomfortable ones, in ways that are honest, grounded, and real. When you begin to integrate these shadow aspects, something shifts. You move from performing to being, from people-pleasing to self-honoring, from hiding behind positivity to embracing truth. You begin living a life where your yes truly means yes, where your boundaries are respected, and where all your emotions, not just the pretty ones, are welcomed and honored. Ever feel like you're your own worst enemy? You set goals, you make plans, maybe you even start strong, but then somehow you find a way to mess it up. That's self-sabotage, and it's a classic sign that your shadow self is quietly calling the shots. Self-sabotage can show up in sneaky ways. Chronic procrastination, putting off what matters until it's too late or the moment has passed, starting something with fire and passion, only to lose motivation halfway through. Or making choices you know are bad for you, in your work, your health, your relationships, almost like some invisible force is holding you back or pushing you off course. And here's the key. This isn't laziness. It's not a character flaw. It's a signal, a sign that your shadow is trying to protect you in its own twisted, outdated way. Carl Jung said, Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That's exactly what happens with self-sabotage. Your conscious mind says, I want change. But your unconscious mind, full of limiting beliefs and buried fear, quietly pulls you in the opposite direction. So, what beliefs live in that shadow? Most often, a deep sense of unworthiness, a hidden belief that you don't deserve success, that happiness, love, or abundance just isn't for you. Even if you consciously believe in yourself, the shadow whispers, who do you think you are? You're not good enough. You'll only fail again. These voices often come from early experiences, moments when you were criticized, overlooked, or made to feel small, and over time, they became part of your inner reality. And here's something surprising. It's not just fear of failure. Sometimes what terrifies your shadow most is success, because success means change. It might mean becoming bigger than the version of you that feels safe. It might mean being seen, taking up space, taking on more responsibility, or outgrowing the identity your shadow has clung to for years. And that can feel deeply threatening. Sometimes self-sabotage is a kind of twisted loyalty to your family, your community, or an old version of yourself. If you grew up where struggle was the norm, ease or success might feel like betrayal. The shadow says, who are you to rise above them? Or maybe you carry unexpressed anger, rebellion, resistance, and sabotage becomes your way of pushing back against invisible pressures or expectations. Shadow work here means asking the real questions. What am I afraid might happen if I succeed? What stories am I still carrying about my worth? What part of me feels safer staying stuck? Through journaling, quiet reflection, or even therapy, you begin to uncover the saboteur behind the curtain. And once these beliefs are conscious, you can begin to challenge them, to reframe them, to see that they're not truths, they're old programming, outdated, inherited, ready to be released. As you integrate the parts of you that fear success or feel unworthy, you free up a huge amount of energy. You stop fighting yourself and start working with yourself. Your goals stop feeling like battles and begin to feel like aligned steps forward. That's the power of shadow work, turning your inner saboteur into an inner ally, so that instead of quietly holding you back, your unconscious finally becomes a partner in your growth. Your shadow stops shouting from the basement and walks with you into the light. Are you super critical of yourself? Always picking apart your flaws, replaying past mistakes, holding yourself to impossible standards? Or maybe your judgment isn't turned inward. Maybe it's pointed out toward others. You catch yourself criticizing, gossiping, nitpicking, even feeling intense irritation at people's looks, choices, or beliefs. Whether it's inward or outward, this pattern of harsh judgment is a powerful sign that your shadow self is running the show. Jungian psychology tells us the traits we judge most harshly in others are often reflections of parts of ourselves we've disowned. It's projection. It's like the world becomes a mirror, showing us what we refuse to see within. If someone's own arrogance gets under your skin, ask, is there a part of me that's confident, but I've labeled it bad and pushed it down? If someone's laziness drives you crazy, ask, am I denying my own need for rest? Do I secretly crave ease, but believe I shouldn't? These reactions aren't always about the other person. They're often about the part of you that was judged, shamed, or rejected a long time ago. Projection is a defense, it says. It's not me who's selfish, it's them. I'm not angry, they're just annoying. Your ego avoids discomfort by pointing fingers. But the shadow stays active underneath, growing stronger the more it's ignored. And then there's self-judgment, that brutal inner critic, the voice in your head that says, you shouldn't feel that. You're too much. That's a dumb idea. This voice didn't come out of nowhere. It's usually a remix of things you were told by parents, teachers, authority figures, sometimes without them even realizing the impact. Over time, this judgmental energy becomes internalized. It starts policing your thoughts, your emotions, your creative expression. You learn that being sensitive or angry or different wasn't safe. So those parts got pushed down into the shadow. This cycle of judgment chips away at your self-esteem. It creates anxiety. It poisons your relationships. Because every time you judge a part of yourself or another person, you reinforce the belief that certain parts of being human are bad or unacceptable. And that belief only digs the shadow deeper. Shadow work here means learning to notice the judgment and then pause. If you're judging someone, ask yourself, what's being triggered in me? Is there a part of myself I see reflected here? What am I afraid of feeling or owning? This kind of honesty takes courage, but it opens the door to real self-awareness. With self-judgment, the work is just as deep. Ask, whose voice is this really? When did I first start believing this was bad? What am I protecting myself from by criticizing myself so harshly? What would happen if I let this part of me exist just as it is? The goal isn't to stop having preferences, boundaries, or discernment. It's to release the charge behind your judgment, that harshness, that contempt, that inner war. It's recognizing that every human being, including you, is made of both light and shadow, strength and sensitivity, confidence and fear, wisdom and insecurity. And when you embrace the parts you've pushed away, you stop needing to judge them in others. You stop living in a war zone and begin building peace inside yourself and in the way you connect with the world. Do you live with this constant hum of anxiety, one that doesn't seem tied to anything specific? Or maybe you go through waves of depression, a heavy fog of sadness, a dull ache in the background of your life, even when on the outside everything seems okay. Or maybe it's not sadness or panic at all. Maybe it's nothing, just numbness, disconnection, like you're watching life from behind a glass wall, present but not really in it. These quiet, confusing states, anxiety, depression, emotional numbness, can be powerful signs that your shadow self is holding on to something heavy, something unfinished, something unresolved. Our minds are meant to feel, to process, to express, but when emotions, especially the difficult ones like grief, fear, shame, or anger, are labeled too much, not okay, unacceptable, they often get pushed away, buried in the unconscious, tucked into the shadow. This can happen because of trauma or because of quiet conditioning. Boys don't cry. Good girls don't get angry. You're too sensitive, just move on. So we learn to silence ourselves, to stay calm, agreeable, unbothered. But the emotions don't disappear. They stay, alive in the shadow, carrying a weight, a charge, a pull. And that hidden weight needs somewhere to go. Sometimes it shows up as anxiety, a vague, buzzing tension we can't explain. Like a pressure cooker with no release valve. That's your body saying, there's something you haven't faced. Something inside still hurts. Or it becomes depression, a slow, heavy shutdown, when so much energy is spent holding things down, numbing, avoiding, protecting. There's none left for joy, movement, or hope. Depression can be unspoken grief, repressed anger, a voice that never got to scream, a sadness that never got to cry. Emotional numbness is its own kind of armor. When life has felt too painful, too overwhelming, your psyche might say, let's just shut this whole system down. And so you stop feeling, you stop hurting, but you also stop connecting to others, to joy, even to yourself. The shadow holds what once felt unsafe to feel. Shadow work here is not about digging up trauma forcefully. It's about creating a safe, internal space for what's been hidden to gently return. It's asking, what emotions have I never allowed myself to feel? When did I first learn they weren't okay? What have I buried so deep it now shows up as nothing? The tools can be gentle, journaling, mindfulness, sitting with emotions without rushing to fix them, working with a therapist who knows how to guide you back to the parts of yourself you left behind. And something beautiful happens when those parts begin to return. The grip of anxiety loosens. Depression lifts, not like a miracle, but like a fog finally beginning to break. And numbness, it softens, making space for feeling again. Not just pain, but also beauty, aliveness, joy. Shadow work is how you reclaim the parts of your emotional landscape that were once closed off. It's not about never feeling bad again. It's about being whole, real, fully human, with a full emotional range that finally feels safe to feel. Do you ever feel like you're playing a role rather than just being yourself? Like there's a gap between who you are inside and who the world sees. You might smile when you want to scream, agree when you disagree, hide your quirks, your truth, your dreams, just to stay safe. This feeling of inauthenticity is one of the deepest signs that your shadow self is quietly asking to be seen. That parts of you, real, vital, powerful parts, have been pushed down, disowned, locked away to make room for the mask. Carl Jung called it the persona, the social mask we wear, the version of ourselves we show the world. It's not wrong, we all wear one. But when the mask becomes the only face, when we cling to it so tightly that we forget what's underneath, we start to feel hollow, lost, disconnected from ourselves. If your persona is built on what you think others expect, then anything that doesn't fit that image, your sensitivity, your wildness, your anger, your deep joy, your intuition, your sensuality gets exiled to the shadow. And that creates a split. One part of you is performing, trying to be good, likable, successful. The other part, the disowned you, watches from the dark, longing to be included. This inner tension might show up as a constant unease, a sense of emptiness, or even success that feels strangely meaningless. You might tick all the boxes and still feel like something's missing. Because it is. You are missing the real you, the unfiltered you. Think about your relationships. Do you find yourself agreeing just to keep the peace? Do you hide your passions because they feel too much? Do you struggle to be vulnerable, even with the people you love? These are signs that your shadow is still carrying the parts of you that feel unsafe to share. Living this way is exhausting. Constant self-monitoring, suppressing your instincts, performing instead of living, and at some point it breaks you down. You burn out, or grow numb, or start to wonder, who am I really? Shadow work is the journey back to authenticity. It's the courage to turn inward and meet the parts of yourself you've kept hidden, the emotions that were too much, the desires that were shamed, the talents you were told to hide, the truths you were afraid to speak. This doesn't mean acting on every impulse or dropping the mask overnight. It means expanding your idea of who you are to include all of you, not just the polished parts, but the raw, real human wholeness beneath. It means saying, I'm allowed to feel what I feel, to want what I want, to take up space, to be imperfect and still worthy of love. As you welcome back your shadow, your mask softens, it becomes transparent, and your true self begins to shine through. You stop performing and start being. The disconnection fades, and in its place comes wholeness, peace, and the quiet, powerful joy of finally being yourself, all the way. If several of these signs hit home, the intense triggers, the same painful patterns in love, the people-pleasing, the self-sabotage, the harsh inner critic, the anxiety, the numbness, or just that quiet voice saying, this isn't really me, then it's time to pause, because your shadow is speaking, not to punish you, but to be seen, to be heard, to be healed. Ignoring these signals doesn't make them go away. If anything, it gives them more power, letting them pull the strings from the dark. That's why your triggers repeat, your relationships replay, and your goals quietly fall apart. Jung said it best, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But shadow work isn't about hunting for more flaws or trying to fix everything that's wrong with you. It's not about erasing the darkness. It's about integration. It's about saying, this is part of me too. I don't have to hide it anymore. Because your shadow doesn't just hold pain, it also holds power, the creativity you never dared to claim, the voice you silenced long ago, the inner fire that once felt too much. All of it waits for you, not in shame, but in potential. And when you turn toward it, gently, bravely, something shifts. You become less divided inside, less reactive, less lost. You begin to feel whole. This is what Jung called individuation, the path of becoming your full, authentic self, not a mask, not a performance, but a deeply integrated human being, grounded, awake, and alive. The gifts of this work: self-awareness, emotional clarity, healthier relationships, creative freedom, deep inner peace. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be honest, willing, curious, and compassionate with yourself as you welcome home every lost piece. This is shadow work, and this is where the real healing begins. As we've walked through these 7 signs, which one spoke to you the most? Was it the explosive triggers, the repeating heartbreaks, the self-sabotage, or that feeling of always wearing a mask? Take a quiet moment, breathe, feel, and just notice what rose to the surface. I'd truly love to hear from you. Your thoughts, your stories, your truth. Drop a comment below, because when we share our journeys, we give others permission to do the same. And if you're ready to keep going, to explore your shadow more deeply, to transform the patterns that keep pulling you off course, and to finally come home to your authentic self, make sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell. This space is here for you. We talk about shadow work, healing, emotional patterns, inner peace regularly, gently, honestly. And if this video supported you in any way, give it a like, not just for the algorithm, but so this work reaches someone who's ready to see themselves too. Thank you for being here, for showing up, for walking this path. Even when it's hard, even when it's messy, you're not alone. Recognizing that you might need shadow work isn't a sign that you're broken. It's a sign of courage, a sign of readiness, a sign that you're longing for something more real, more whole, more you. These 7 signs, they're not judgments, they're invitations. Invitations to explore the rich, complex, misunderstood landscape of your own mind. Shadow work isn't about chasing perfection. It's not about fixing yourself. It's about compassion. Turning toward all that you are, even the messy bits, the hidden fears, the parts you were told not to love. Because by making the darkness conscious, you don't become darker, you become whole.